Did you miss your deadline to renew your Medicaid coverage? You can still send your completed annual review form to Healthy Connections Medicaid. You may be assigned to another health plan, but you can ask to come back to First Choice within 60 days of renewed Medicaid eligibility. It's your family. It's your choice. First Choice is the right choice. Renew and choose us. Visit selecthealthofsc.com/renew to learn more.
This is a CNA podcast.
Rivers are the lifeblood of the planet. The Mekong is Southeast Asia's longest and probably most important. Where the river meets the sea is the heart of Vietnam's food bowl. But climate change and unsustainable human activity have formed a perilous cocktail here. And now millions of people in this region face a less certain future. My name's Jack Board, CNA's Climate Change Correspondent. On this special edition of the Climate Conversations, I bring you stories of ecosystems at risk. This week, I travel to the Mekong Delta, where uncertain water supplies mean farmers are having to adapt to a tough new future. This is Asia's Great Climate Frontiers. Over many years, the floating market in the city of Can Tho has transformed into a popular destination for visitors. I begin my journey here in the Delta. The market is a maze on water, with boat traders buying and selling their wares, fruit, vegetables and fish. But while locals are feeling the effects of economic and environmental factors, it's tourists who are keeping the trade here afloat. The plight of the market tells the story of the rapid urbanisation that defines much of the modern-day Delta. On board one of those tourist vessels, I speak with Min, a boat driver who's spent his whole life here.
I've witnessed lots of changes here. My childhood was a happy time. Now it's developed and not as it used to be in the past. I've many childhood friends who lived on boats. Since business went down, they went up to land and started their new life in other cities. They went everywhere and anywhere to make a living. Fishermen now buy farmed fishes to sell at markets. Some people go to work in factories. Some people buy trucks to deliver goods or cars to run taxi services. It's impossible to survive on the river now.
I can see vividly how erosion has caused houses along the banks to collapse. Only an elaborate dike and gate system keeps the swollen Mekong from flooding the city during the wet season. Salinity is an issue here too, and authorities need to actively manage drinking water supplies. It's tough living in the Delta right now. It's why many are abandoning the area every year in search of a more stable life in the city. It's an option being considered by rice farmer Nguyen Van Chon. For generations, the Delta has been a place of plenty, enriched by the flow of the Mekong. But every season is different now, and the river doesn't flow like it always used to. I travelled up to Nguyen's community in An Giang province and joined him in the field.
In general, water comes unpredictably. Water is not as usual compared to our grandparents' time. When it's not as usual, it's a bit more difficult for me to cultivate. If I can't grow rice in the future, I'll go find something else to do. Something with a monthly salary of between 5 and 10 million Vietnamese dong. If you can't do rice, what can you do here? My grandparents used to say that the river is the source of life. If you live with water, it will bring profits to the farmer. Water is to serve for irrigation of fields or cultivation, or for drinking water for ourselves. If I don't have water, how can I live?
Farmers like him rely on canals connected to the Mekong to keep their fields irrigated. Rice is a thirsty crop, and water is an expensive commodity when nature cannot provide. Droughts have become a feature in this normally lush landscape. Why is this happening? It's complicated. Some of the reasons lie upriver. The flow of the once mighty Mekong has been jeopardised by the construction of large hydropower dams that impact the seasonal flood pulse. I've seen them myself. These are enormous structures that have drastically changed the face of the river. Brian Eiler is the director of the Stimson Centre Southeast Asia program and the co-lead on the Mekong Dam Monitor. It's a public data platform that assesses the impact of hydropower projects and climate impacts on the river basin. He tells me it's not just Vietnam that's facing the brunt of the climate crisis.
Upstream dams and other human interventions are impacting what I call the mightiness of the Mekong. It's impacting the fishery and impacting agricultural yields. And we have to remember that Cambodia and Vietnam, particularly Cambodia, are not as well resourced. There are a lot of impoverished people there, a lot of livelihoods that rely on the Mekong's natural resources. So as these impacts take hold, it's becoming harder and harder to live there. Climate is a factor, particularly during the wet season, that's pulling the river levels down. But upstream dams throughout the upper Mekong, big dams in China, dams in Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia are also taking water out of the river system during the wet season when it's needed, and they put it back in during the dry season. Now, we've learned that the impacts of these dams are the greatest when the climate impacts are the greatest, when the rains aren't coming as much as they should be. Cambodia and Vietnam share this common floodplain space, or share the delta. And in Cambodia, the Tonle Sap Lake is the world's most productive inland fishery for a single body of water. It expands during the wet season 5 times its size, and then it contracts during the dry season. And it's that expansion and the contraction that form the beating heart of the Mekong. And that's where the fish come from. It's where the agricultural productivity, the root of that productivity lies as well. You need a fairly constant rising flood pulse during the wet season to make that expansion robust. When you mess with that rhythm, then you're increasing food security concerns. You're increasing water security concerns within that shared space of Vietnam and Cambodia. Vietnam has made some missteps in the region, and it's not too late to kind of walk them back or think about alternative solutions. Already too many dams have been built for them in the Mekong, and we're seeing the impacts play out. So Vietnam can take a wider toolbox of solutions to their neighbors to protect its own delta downstream.
I'm standing at the end of the line for the Mekong, the point where its long journey ends. Here in Bac Leu province, a series of wind turbines sit offshore, harnessing coastal breezes to provide clean power to the region. 23 kilometres of seawall tell another story, one of a battle with the tides. Southern Vietnam is low-lying and extremely vulnerable to sea level rise driven by climate change. The shoreline here is muddy and littered with debris. Communities used to exist in small hamlets, but have since been moved on to areas further away from the encroaching sea. Mangroves used to grow right along the coastline, and there's a project plan to bring them back to slow down erosion. That widespread erosion along the coastline and saline intrusion, which is the influx of salty water into freshwater aquifers, is becoming problematic. Underground water resources have been contaminated, and farmers are seeing their crops fail more often. As salt has slowly invaded the land, more of them in this area have turned to shrimp-growing ventures instead of fruit, vegetables or rice, which have a low tolerance to saline-affected water. Next to the sea, I chat with Wang Phung Thao, the country director of Action Aid Vietnam. She's worried about what she's seeing.
This is a home to more than 23 million people. Due to climate change and a very wrong way of using resources from Mekong, people here have lost a lot of their livelihoods. They are losing their shelter. They are losing their own water. Because of sea level and salination, water becomes so salty, and therefore nothing can be grown except mangrove and crabs and shrimp. When the water is rising for 1 meter here, about 30 million people in Mekong Delta in Vietnam will lose their home, their shelters. That is significant only for Vietnam. I can't talk about other countries, but Therefore, we really hope that more and more people are looking down to the earth and not just talking about, big promising flowery words, and let's see what would be the solutions. People determined to survive, and if we care, then we can change it together.
So what are the local solutions? For one, a university here is doing extensive research on water use and climate change to boost rice farming resilience. Its projects aim to help farmers cooperate using modern growing techniques instead of competing with each other. Other farmers are getting organised into cooperatives to save money and gain access to technology. Like Nguyen Phúc Hung, who uses a smart monitoring application specifically developed for rice farmers. I watch him as he stands by his rice field, getting live readings on water levels and pest warnings. It seems like helpful progress, given the climate challenges that exist. And he agrees.
It helps me save on labour and earn a higher profit. I have more time for other things. Without the irrigation support from the cooperative, I have to spend all day in the field. Now it's much better. Using the app helps me predict what might come to my field so that I can prepare. But in the future, I don't want my children to grow rice like their father. It's hard and dirty work.
If people don't have hope for the future in the Delta, it poses existential questions for Vietnam and the greater region. The Mekong has always provided life, and so it continues. But looking after this great river has never been more challenging and more important. This has been Jack Board. Thank you for listening to this special episode of the Climate Conversations. The team behind this podcast are Crispina Robert, Jacqueline Chan, Daniel Lee, Joanne Chan, and Tiffany Ung.